Cartoon Network never really premiered any new original cartoons in 2009, partially due to the writer strike as well as the Aqua Teen movie controversy, leading them to rely on Canadian import shows for a short while. In the spring of 2010, they would premiere one of their biggest shows in the history of the network ever. It's the series that would end the classic era of Cartoon Network shows and begin the modern era of Cartoon Network shows. Is it really modern anymore if the series premiered 15 years ago? Don't get me wrong, but this premiered the same year that Kick Buttowski, Fishhooks, and Tough Puppy all premiered, and those all look visually dated compared to Adventure Time, which still kinda holds up in 2025. Though the first two seasons can look a bit rough at times, and they even had weird quirks like Finn's eyes bulging out, which would disappear around season 2. What I also don't get is how the series' sneak peeks during March 2010 don't count as its premiere, while other shows like Gym Partners and Ben 10's sneak peeks in December 2005 count as their premieres. Most sources say that it premiered in April 2010, on the same day we got a sneak peek to Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated, which is just Peak Scooby. Just a month before that, the two episodes Business Time and Evicted premiered. They should at least count as something. This series is responsible for leading into an era of cartoons where the characters' faces are shaped like beans, which was pretty common in the 2010s, and hasn't really gone away. If you look at something more recent like Primos, Stewie, or even the upcoming Wildy Pack series, they're designed very similarly to what cartoons looked like just a decade ago. In retrospect, this series shares a bit of similarities with Fanboy and Chum Chum, another Frederator series. Both main characters' names start with the letter F, who are accompanied by their orange friends. Both series even have an ice character and a gum character. And that's not even mentioning both series using fart jokes at times. Speaking of which, both series started off as a part of the Nickelodeon pilot showcase series, Random Cartoons, which is the successor to Oh Yeah Cartoons, which is Nick's take on the What a Cartoon show. You'd probably heard the story before. LS Mark even makes a good point about it in his Fanboy and Chum Chum video, so go check it out. This is the earliest Series 1 vividly remember catching new episodes airing on TV back then. During this show's peak, which is the first 4 seasons and maybe a bit of 5, this series had a lot of memorable bits, whether it be the little jingles they'd sing such as Bacon Pancakes, or really funny moments like the Boing Gallowings line. Somewhere along the way, the series sort of lost that in favor for more lore-driven stories. They'd even do little mini-series near the end of its run, such as the Stakes one. A lot of the songs written during the show's peak are really memorable and unironically good too. A lot of this series' most iconic songs were written by the storyboard artist Rebecca Sugar, who'd later create her own series for the network just a couple years later. I remember having a bunch of merch for it when I was younger, such as toys, shirts, books, and DVDs. I remember wearing a green t-shirt with Finn and Jake dancing, and reading the cool official encyclopedia book they made. I also remember getting the DVDs that came with cool hats based on both Finn and Jake. The first 3DS game I've ever played was an Adventure Time one, and I remember playing a bunch of old Flash games based on the series on the now-defunct Cartoon Network website. Since the series concluded in 2018, it has gotten both the Distant Land specials, as well as the Fiona and Cake spin-off, which is more mature than the original series, which was already more mature compared to anything that had premiered before. This being the first Cartoon Network original series being rated TV-PG, with the new spin-off being TV-14. The original Fiona and Cake episode in 2011 was just a story told by Ice King about him pro-shipping himself with a female version of the kid who beats him up fairly often, which definitely hasn't aged well. This is also the Cartoon Network series with the most seasons, which is 10. Just like Frederator's other popular series, The Fairly Odd Parents, which you could tell it definitely overstayed its welcome. While the Eds had been on the air for much longer, Adventure Time has the most episodes of any Cartoon Network series period. While Flapjack was pretty influential, Adventure Time, being the popular phenomena that it is even more influential in comparison. This series not only was an inspiration to other cartoons, but it also helped shape me into the person I am today. I don't know where I would be today without this series. Regular show, just 1 week after Flapjack ended, came the premiere of this show, with the premiere of Mad, just right after. Not a lot of people mention this, but Warner Brothers used to premiere some of their shows on the same day that the channel's Big 3, with the last one not even being mentioned yet. While not as massive as Adventure Time was, regular show's still a pretty popular series for the network. Just like that series, it has a TV-PG rating, TV-PGV, if you will. This show is possibly Cartoon Network's most adult series ever, feeling like an Adult Swim series that found itself on Cartoon Network. The characters even swear at times. The series follows the two 23-year-old slackers, Mordecai, the Blue Jay, and Rigby, the Raccoon, as their laziness often escalates into world-ending scenarios that are usually resolved by the end, followed by their boss, Benson, the sentient gumball machine, threatening to fire them. Sometimes the problems come from Mordecai's love interest, Margaret. You'd think a plot like this would get real old very quickly, but it works really well in regular show favor, mainly due to the witty writing and dialogue which are really funny. Amphibia, a Disney Channel series that premiered almost a decade after, also follows this formula early on, but it doesn't really work there as much, as it feels a lot more predictable. The episodes of that show would usually end with a character, usually Anne, apologizing and quickly being forgiven by the Plantars, yet the town treats her like a monster. In regular show, the episodes usually end with Benson yelling at the two, with them not even learning their lesson. Speaking of episodes, the format for most Cartoon Network shows starting around this era and going forward would change from a 22-minute episode containing 2 segments to 11-minute episodes counting as the whole episode, with the occasional double-length half-hour specials. I also used to have some merch from this show when I was younger too, though not as much as Adventure Time's merch, even though I liked this show better. I also played the heck out of its Flash games too, like Ride 'em Rigby, Night Marathon, and Fist Punch. I even had the 3DS game too, that's lacking in fan service, and has an insanely drawn-out final boss. They even made a half-hour special, poking fun at the quality of some of its merchandise, most notably the toys that I never got the chance of getting. One aspect I dislike from the series, however, are the episodes revolving around Mordecai's love life, which is fine at first, but rears its ugly head when we get to the infamous love triangle between him, Margaret, and CJ, that takes up majority of Season 6. CJ being this cloud girl who was initially a one-time character back in Season 3, who Mordecai started dating because he saw Margaret with someone else, not knowing they're related. This comes back to bite him in the New Year's party episode of Season 5, where she returns while Margaret's in college, becoming a recurring character in the process. When Margaret returns, that's where things go downhill for Mordecai. Whenever he gets close to Margaret for even 1 second, CJ gets upset. You could say that CJ's too clingy towards him, but Margaret isn't even better. She's often oblivious to Mordecai's crush on her, and she even made Mordecai lose a bet towards Muscle Man because she didn't want to kiss his chilly dog breath. Also, most secondary characters are voiced by Sonic. The turning point of the series would have to be the train crash that is dumped at the altar, the episode to finally end the love triangle arc of Mordecai's life, where he interrupts Muscle Man and Starla's wedding. These are usually the points in some shows where most people would stop watching. Adventure Time has experienced a similar fate with the episode Frost and Fire, which was infamous enough to have its own DVD release, where Finn gets a wet dream after seeing Flame Princess and Ice King fight, forcing them to do it again. I guess he learned nothing from playing God previously that season. I'd personally say the cutoff point for most Adventure Time fans would have to be the Time Sandwich episode, with one scene getting millions of views on YouTube, making it the most watched clip of the series. This would be followed by the TV movie focusing on Mordecai and Rigby's relationship and time traveling. The 7th season would involve the park being trapped in a dome, as well as an arc where Rigby goes back to high school, where he actually graduates. This would then be followed by the 8th and final season where the park goes to space, with the first half dedicated to wacky space antics, with the other half involving one of the main characters gaining more lore to them. But I'm not going to spoil it for those who haven't seen the series. Not to mention how this series spawned a lot of dude bro cartoons like Sanjay and Craig, or Pickle and Peanut later in the decade. I think this is Cartoon Network's best series ever, in my opinion, because I don't think any show, in the foreseeable future, that'll be able to top it. The Amazing World of Gumball. Here's our first hit in quite a bit. Unlike most of the previous shows, this one was worked on by Cartoon Network Development Studio Europe, who have renamed themselves Hanna-Barbera Studios Europe since. I don't think this series really needs an introduction, because it never stopped airing since it premiered, despite not making any new episodes in years. Many of the episodes revolve around the financial troubles of the Watterson family, much like the really early Simpsons. In one episode, they tried turning their house into a bed and breakfast, after Richard spends all their money on a pony named Thunderclop. Or even the first episode, where Gumball and Darwin try to get money in order to pay for a DVD fine without getting in trouble from their mother. The best example comes from the episode, The Money, where the Wattersons became broke to the point of destroying reality. The show relies heavily on meta-humor in its later years, such as the one where they poke fun at its Chinese ripoff, or the one where they poke fun at fans' OCs. I think the show back in its first season had the most charming art style, and the series felt very different compared to what it would later become. As the humor got smarter, Gumball became less naive, and the charm of that first season seems to fade away quickly. Compared to Adventure Time and regular show, which both peaked early on, during the early 2010s, Gumball, on the other hand, despite premiering around that time, I'd say peaked during the mid-2010s, because of it finding its footing. The series also has a few hints of continuity, too, like Penny being outside her shell for more than half of the series, and Rob going from a reject to the main antagonist. The series ends on a cliffhanger. One key factor to why the show took longer to find its footing is because it's a lot more complex to produce compared to everything else I had talked about. I mean, just look at it. It uses a bunch of different mediums on its characters, like 2D, CGI, and even live action. The citizens of Elmore are almost as ruthless as the Springfieldians or Bikini Bottomites, especially that orange Karen lady. There's also the occasional bits where the art style would just change, similar to certain Adventure Time episodes. Overall, this show's pretty amazing. This is possibly the earliest instance of the infamous bean mouth face that would appear in a lot of 2010 shows, even outside of Cartoon Network's control. Uncle Grandpa. Uncle Grandpa is this mythical humanoid being who helps children with their problems in the most ridiculous ways imaginable. But this is often pushed aside, as he more often than not bums around with his pals like Giant Realistic Flying Tiger, Mr. Gus, and Pizza Steve, who'd get their own Friday night block very early into the series run. Even the sign on and off were changed to be Uncle Grandpa peeking over a mountaintop with classical music, saying his iconic catchphrase, "Good morning." Obviously, this series is a lot better than Pete Browngart's previous series, Secret Mountain Fort Awesome. Pizza Steve is just as iconic, if not more iconic, than Uncle Grandpa himself. In the earlier episodes, you can tell there's a bit of crudeness from Secret Mountain left over, but this quickly goes away as the series gets a lot more refined in its art style. In the series' later years, the backgrounds got a lot more detailed, and Uncle Grandpa is more consistently off-model, to where his eyes are smaller and his mustache looks like a noodle. Never understood the hate for the series, as it's just a wacky comedy series where anything goes, much like Nickelodeon's Fanboy and Chum Chum, which also tries to be a wacky comedy series rather than a gross-out one. Sanjay and Craig are more in line with gross-out humor. What also doesn't help is that this aired at a time where a lot of cartoons were focusing more on serialization, something I'd go more in-depth about with the next series. This series is also presented in a format as weird as the titular character himself, where usually the first 7 minutes is like the primary episode, followed by 10 seconds of the characters being in a white void, which is then followed by a short either relating to the main cast, or other characters like Evil Wizard or Barry Nice and Hot Dog Person. I'd say this series is pretty good. Steven Universe. Now here's a show with a colorful history. If you're expecting an education show about gemstones, then you've come to the wrong place. The series follows the titular character, a young boy that just so happens to also be a gem, as you can see from his belly. He's one of the members of a group of gems called the Crystal Gems. The intro even explains who they are and what their purpose is, a bit, but never really goes in depth with their personalities. Steven's your typical shonen protagonist, who looks up to the other crystal gems and wants to learn more about himself and his deceased mother. Spoiler alert, he is his own mother. I should probably avoid spoilers when talking about this series. Unlike other gems, he's a human hybrid. Other members of the crystal gems include Garnet, the quiet leader who hardly ever emotes, Amethyst, a lazy slob that often goofs around, and Pearl, the mature and naggy one. They all act like motherly figures to Steven in some way, often trying to protect him early on, despite him wanting to be in the action too. Together, they all try to protect Beach City from all kinds of dangers, though we learn more about it later in the series. As you can probably tell by now, this is a very story-heavy show, even more than Adventure Time, as it leans more towards drama than comedy, despite the cutesy art style. Speaking of the art style, this is where we officially reached the infamous bean-mouth fad that a lot of 2010s and a few 2020 shows had, although early traces of it were previously seen in both Adventure Time and Gumball. I honestly don't think this show's art direction's that bad. In fact, it's quite beautiful, with its mostly pastel color palette. The only thing you could compare it to at the time was the new Bee and Puppycat pilot that you could watch on your Nintendo 3DS. What's even more fantastic is the soundtrack. Even though this series isn't really a musical, it still has a lot of good songs that rival some of the best Adventure Time songs. This is mostly because the creator, Rebecca Sugar, worked on both series and wrote songs for each of them. Back when this show was new, I wasn't all that into it. The first episode had him puking, he was naked in another episode, he almost died of old age, and even turned into a cat monster. When I was younger, this all felt pretty awkward, and it made me want to turn away from the show. Which I did at first, but one day in 2015, I went on Reddit, and it seemed like everyone on there was praising the show all of a sudden, pairing it up with the popular Disney Channel series Gravity Falls, and for some reason the Adult Swim series Rick and Morty. At first, I thought people were liking it for ironic reasons, even though I actually like Gravity Falls for being about as snappy as regular show. One day in 2016, I randomly caught an episode airing on TV, and I thought it was quite decent. Then came 2017, where I tried to catch reruns of it whenever it would play. This show really peaked in those middle seasons, where it wasn't as uncomfortable as the first season but wasn't as focused as its last season, but I think the cozier slice of life episodes are the best ones in my opinion. Nothing will ever top the episode where Pearl and Peridot fight in giant robots. If Adventure Time and My Little Pony Friendship is Magic were the embodiment of the early 2010s, then Steven Universe and Starverses, the forces of evil, would be the embodiment of the mid-2010s. Granted, I stopped being a fan of My Little Pony by the time when the Discovery Family era of the show began, which was around the same time Steven Universe boosted into popularity with the episode Jailbreak. I didn't keep up with every episode, even though I should've. Season 5 was notoriously slow when it came to episode releases, so I didn't follow along with it, but I did see the finale to the original series in 2019. Later in that same year, Cartoon Network celebrated Labor Day by airing nothing but Steven Universe for the entire weekend, leading up to Steven Universe the movie, which I caught live on TV. After listening to Drift Away a bunch of times on YouTube, I decided to stop watching Steven Universe ever since, which made me miss out on the epilogue series, Steven Universe Future. I forgot to mention it, but both the movie and Future have a 2-year time skip from the end of the original series. Luckily, I didn't check it out, because that's when the series started to get seen in a negative light, with its bad fanbase, rushed ending, and its epilogue series being Toy Story 4 level mid. Same with the Disney XD series, Star vs. the Forces of Evil, where it started to fall off around the last 2 seasons, where Starco is focused more primarily, as well as it taking place on Muni rather than Earth, leading to one of the worst finales in television. That's how it ends? The show that had it the worst was Adult Swim's Rick and Morty, with its creator being a horrible person. I'm glad people still like Gravity Falls though. Overall, the series is quite decent, just like my initial opinions on it when it first came out. Looking back on this show, it's safe to say that it's very similar to Friendship is Magic. I stopped watching around that show's 5th season. Clarence. We're hit with another bean-mouth cartoon, Clarence. If you're a boomer, you might confuse him for Steven Universe from the previous series of the same name. It doesn't help that they premiered around the same time. Unlike Steven Universe, this show is primarily focused on slice of life, just without Pizza Steve. It follows the titular character, who's a young boy that is optimistic, and very friendly, in a more realistic kind of way. He's the embodiment of childlike wonder, and let's be honest, we were all like Clarence as kids. He's friends with Jeff, who's a neat freak kid with a square head, and Sumo, a chaotic bald kid often getting Clarence into shenanigans. There's also Belson, the rich kid, who is kind of a bully to Clarence, but is too lazy to be one, and often plays video games instead. Deep down he kinda appreciates him, but he just doesn't want to admit it. He's got that regular show minor character voice. Clarence might be Cartoon Network's most realistic series ever, as there's not really anything outlandish about it, unless it's a part of Clarence's imagination. Like one episode was drawn in a rubber hose style up until the end, where it's all just in Clarence's mind. I find this series pretty funny, especially the earlier episodes, because of how unhinged Clarence can be. Even though this is one of the last primarily TVPG-rated shows, here you could start to notice how Cartoon Network's slowly trying to aim towards kids. This would get progressively worse once Cartoon Network started to fully embrace Teen Titans Go as its primary series in terms of marketing. I thought it was fine at first, but it's gotten worse the longer it's been going, and it's still currently airing new episodes to this day. The series one could compare it the most to is The Fairly Odd Parents, which features similar writing issues, same with a lot of cartoons during that show's peak. The only difference is that Teen Titans Go is a lot more self-aware in addition to its cynicalness, constantly poking fun at the haters, even if nobody even cares anymore. It really should have ended with the 2018 movie. The series has been airing for so long that the people who grew up with it are starting to form opinions. The We Bare Bears franchise. This series started off as Tumblr comics, before getting picked up for a series. This marks the first Cartoon Network show in a long while to have a TVY7 rating. It follows the three bear bros, Grizz, Panda, and Ice Bear, as they try to fit in with society, despite being bears. This might be one of Cartoon Network's more cozier shows, as it has a more chill vibe to it compared to anything that came before in the decade. It's also the first show I can recall that actually felt like it took place in the 2010s, with it acknowledging smartphones and memes without being too in your face about it like the 2016 Powerpuff Girls reboot. Most episodes depict the bears as adults, though there are the occasional ones focusing on them as babies, which are a lot more formulaic compared to the ordinary stuff. The baby bears often find themselves wanting to find a home, which leads to them being in trouble, and after the problem is solved, the cycle repeats itself. I'm not too much of a fan of these episodes compared to the normal bear stuff. Like with Steven Universe, the show would have its own Labor Day weekend marathon leading up to its respective movie, focusing on the bears going on a road trip adventure since they're on the run after somehow hacking everybody's phones. It's basically Sponge on the Run done right. After a year of no content, the franchise came back in the form of We Baby Bears, a spin-off series focusing on the bears as babies. But this time it's a lot more surreal. The original series felt almost as grounded as Clarence, despite the main characters being literally talking bears who are friends with Bigfoot, with more surreal stuff happening every so often. In this series, the baby bears have a magical box that can take them anywhere in the universe. Again, the baby bear plots here are just as formulaic as the original series, where each episode has them exploring a new place, only for them to leave and find a new one by the next episode. Despite the more anime-like art style, it feels too cutesy for me. Not saying that it's bad, but I don't see myself really watching this often. They also got Toby Fox, the creator of Undertale, which came out the same year as the original series, to voice a skeleton pirate in an episode. It's a very solid franchise overall. Does a better job at being consistent compared to the Powerpuff Girls, Ben 10, and might I say Steven Universe too? Here's a show with the most troubled production behind it. OKKO, Let's Be Heroes. Around the same time the Steven Universe and Clarence pilots released, came the Lakewood Plaza Turbo pilot, which features early versions of the OKKO characters, where they all look very different, especially Enid, who almost looks like an entirely different character and even has Clarence's mother's voice. This would later be poked fun of in the actual series. Afterwards, we heard nothing from this pilot for years until 2016, when it suddenly gets a mobile app, where the characters are slightly evolving from their pilot incarnations. It's a fun side-scrolling beat-em-up game, with fun story progression. Alongside it, came a bunch of series of shorts, where the characters are closer to how they appear in the TV series, that would premiere in the summer of 2017, right after the Teen Titans Go's Night Begin to Shine episodes. The series follows a young boy, named Kaio, who works at a bodega that sells supplies for heroes. His co-workers are radicals, an alien with levitation powers, and Enid, who's a ninja. His boss is Mr. Gar, and his mother works at a fitness dojo in the same plaza. There's also an evil factory across the street, run by Lord Boxman, who produces robots that attack the plaza, which the employees have to fight. In Season 1, Kaio often finds himself wanting to level up and become a hero, because in this universe, your level determines how strong and heroic you are. Like a video game, these are recorded onto POW cards, which are collectible cards that stores information and allows people to know their progress. The higher your level is, the stronger you are, though there are negative levels that determine how evil a character is, and you're both neutral and weak if it's just at 0. Kaio is a pretty huge fan of them, as well as his smart friend, Dendi, who appears sometimes. On paper, that might sound repetitive, but in execution, this series never takes itself too seriously, and has fun doing whatever. Some episodes they don't even fight robots at all. This series has a sort of nostalgic charm that's closer to a lot of pre-Adventure Time Cartoon Network shows, while still having traits of a post-Adventure Time Cartoon Network show. This series is not at all formulaic like, let's say, Phineas and Ferb, though despite that series having a lot of the same plot beats in most episodes, it can still get really creative. This series also got continuity, though it doesn't feel forced at all, so a lot of episodes could be watched in any order. Like, you don't need to watch a previous episode to know how Radicals turned into a burger or something, which is something that actually happens in the series due to its silly nature. One thing I like about the series is the world building, because I find the universe the characters live in quite interesting. I enjoy a lot of the designs of the background characters in the series, because their designs are really appealing and are just as, if not more interesting to explore than the main characters, who are all really good characters themselves. Also wished we explore locations like the Danger Zone or Neo Riot City some more, rather than just the plaza and Boxmoor. I'm not complaining about the final product, though I do wish it explored a bit more. Not to mention this series would occasionally have crossover episodes, such as the Captain Planet and Ghoul School ones. The most notable crossovers to ever come from the series are Crossover Nexus and Let's Meet Sonic, which I believe are some people's only exposure to the series. Which is a shame since the series is more than that, but at the same time, they put a lot of passion into their work. Crossover Nexus takes place in the old CN City from the 2000s decade, where a foe summons KO and turn him into stone. But with the help of Garnet, 2016 Ben Tennyson, and Lady Legasis, they all team up to beat him. We even get a cool sequence of Ben transforming into multiple Cartoon Network characters from over the years, and tons of fun Easter eggs throughout. The Sonic crossover is kinda the same, though KO doesn't go to the Sonic universe, but it's the other way around, with Sonic and Tails visiting the bodega which promises free chili dogs, which is actually a trick from Lord Boxman, as Darrell kidnaps Rad and Enid while they're napping, and it's up to KO and his Mobian friends to stop him. We even get to see Robot KO again from the alternate universe episode. Like the previous crossover, there's a bunch of references here too, with it even ending with a PSA, akin to the old 90s Sonic cartoon. It's almost like the writers are equally as much a fan of Sonic as KO is, and he's a huge fan of him. As the first season progresses, we get to see the main conflict of the series to arise, which involves KO's relationship with his edgy evil alter ego, TKO. as well as the series' most important antagonist, shadowy figure, who plans on hoarding glowing orbs called glorbs from a glorb tree planted underneath the plaza. Who might this shadowy figure be? I'm not going to spoil important details. A more minor one that becomes more relevant as the series progresses is the relationship between Professor Venomous and Lord Boxman. This conflict doesn't affect every episode, though it does get brought up from time to time, like Mr. Gar and KO going on a stakeout to prevent shadowy figure from getting glorbs, and Dendy trying to push KO's limits before transforming into TKO and destroying her lab in Dexter's laboratory fashion. The following season also involves plot points revolving around Point, an old superhero team that Carol and Mr. Gar used to be in when they were younger, and how they're not what they seem. Though this mainly began around the middle of the season, where Enid applies for Point Prep and reunites with Elodie for a couple of episodes before dropping out. Even changing the credits briefly, though for about a year this arc got interrupted by a hiatus that lasted about a year before getting resolved. Now's a good time to talk about how horrid Cartoon Network's schedule was during this era. Back in July 2017, episodes were dumped onto the CN app to be viewed before they aired on TV. However, they weren't unlocked, meaning that you must have a cable provider to view them, which is a strategy Cartoon Network had been doing for a while, especially around this time. The series didn't officially premiere on the network until August, where the first couple episodes made their debut, after Teen Titans Go. This show also got a decent amount of advertising around this time too. Throughout the rest of the year from August to November, the series would premiere at least one episode per week. By the end of 2017, over 40 episodes of the series had premiered. Not sure if this was a sign that Cartoon Network wanted to get rid of the series, or it was just that cheap to make. I mean, I've seen anime premiere episodes frequently but never Western cartoons, because those take a bit more time. While it might seem like this series would become the next big hit for Cartoon Network, unfortunately, episodes would premiere less frequently going into 2018, as the series took a backseat for newer shows that would be premiering. That doesn't mean that the series completely stopped airing, because it did get to air the rest of Season 1 and even some earlier Season 2 episodes, but reruns were almost non-existent, meaning you could only catch these episodes air only once. Then we get to summer 2018, where as a part of Cartoon Network's best summer ever branding, though I personally wouldn't really consider that because this was late 2010s Cartoon Network after all, ironically enough, the series abruptly gets put to a hiatus during a school arc. Any summer spent with Teen Titans Go, Ben 1010, and the putrid Puff Girls reboot is nowhere near the best, and the fact that the best series currently airing never got to conclude its arc really hurts it. What hurts even more is that the hiatus lasted a year long, where only 3 episodes premiered in between. Episodes didn't start regularly airing again until 2019, with the rest of Season 2 and all of Season 3, though without any announcement from the network itself, cause they just wanted it to be done with it. Shortly after the premiere of Steven Universe the movie, this series ended with 3 back-to-back episodes, with the middle being a half-hour special. This also marked the last time the series would ever air on the network, though it did become available to watch on both Hulu and HBO Max before getting purged off both platforms, with no signs of it returning, since it's barely acknowledged by the network itself anymore. Because it's a real shame, because this was a highlight during the era where the network began going downhill to the state where it's at today. Though I'm almost kind of glad that it didn't last into pandemic times. Not to say the series didn't get any merchandise at all, but there was very little of it. The series only got 1 DVD release and a singular video game titled Let's Play Heroes that had been delisted from all digital stores, though there is a physical copy of it that's paired up with Steven Universe's Save the Light, but good luck trying to find it out in the wild. I actually remember playing the PS4 version of it when it came out in 2018, and it was a very fun experience. Despite the different art style done by the people who'd later work on #Blood, the writing is very much on par with the series itself, much like how Hit and Run or Battle for Bikini Bottom feel just like their source material. Did you know in certain scenes, symbols appear on screen for a bit, which you could enter in the game's POW card machine? This series also had a couple of mobile games too, like the previously mentioned Precursor game from 2016 that includes earlier versions of the characters, which plays out like a side-scrolling beat-em-up. Another app this series had was the Action News app, which stars Dynamite Watkins, who is the series' own news anchor woman that first appears when KO's POW card glitched to level 100. This game is essentially a rhythm game that involves swiping your phone to the corresponding arrows to form an attack move. Lastly, this series had an Endless Runner game that was included in the now-defunct Cartoon Network Arcade app, which is basically a revamped version of the Magisword app just with games included, making it essentially Nintendo Badge Arcade without the microtransactions. I believe there were some collectible OKKO figures present in that app early on, but they'd become lost media once the app shut down. Aside from that, the series had a few online games too, but I won't go too in-depth with those. Not sure what else I could say about this fantastic series. I'd say it's pretty close to being considered the channel's best show, though regular show had a lot more to offer, despite being a bit more flawed, especially when it comes to episodes revolving around Mordecai's love relationship between Margaret and CJ. OKKO is less flawed in comparison, with only a few episodes I consider weak, but is overall still excellent, though there is a lot to be desired, though that mainly has to do with how Cartoon Network treated the show. Like they refused to greenlit the Hugh Troop spin-off series. OKKO still has a lot of unexplored potential under its belt, and I also have to admit that its universe is a lot more interesting than regular shows. Although it's hard to say goodbye to such a good series like this, KO fought to the end, and more importantly, is my best friend. Apple and Onion. I can tell that I'm getting pretty near the end of this list because this was around the time I slowly began to stop watching Cartoon Network altogether. This is when Cartoon Network really started to lean towards being a kids' channel. I wasn't tuning in as much when this and Craig began airing, though I have seen some episodes from both series. Wouldn't say this is any better than OKKO overall. It's still pretty enjoyable. The series takes place in a city full of diverse food and drink characters, with them being named after their respective food and drinks. The titular characters are no different, being a dorky duo that try to make every day as fun as possible, but more down-to-earth compared to Phineas and Ferb. They often get themselves in crazy predicaments, like trying to get a duck off their roof so they could save their song they planned for the block party, before their ice cream cake melts and corrupts their computer. Other times they drive people crazy with their quirkiness, like in the bus episode where they get kicked out because Apple needed to pee, or when they tried to spend the day with falafel and let all his innards fall out. Despite that, they often feel remorse for their actions, and try to make it up in the end too. Not to mention, they often sing a lot too. Can't forget about the Bottle Catch song. Although Cartoon Network acknowledges this show a bit more than OKKO, but not by much, there's not much to say about it due to its simple episodic nature, though the intro changed near the end of the series. The Craig of the Creek franchise. Here is another late-stage era Cartoon Network series, but unlike some of the shows that came before, and majority that came after, this show managed to get a lengthy run, lasting 6 seasons, and being the latest series to ever end. Almost makes me question how this show stuck around for so long, and how it managed to do so, when many of the shows surrounding it can barely make it past 2 seasons. It's also the first Cartoon Network series, in over a decade, to have an African-American protagonist after Class of 3000, which is what I call progressive. It's yet another series with a young boy whose name is on the title, just like Steven and Clarence, though he's accompanied by 2 redhead kids named Kelsey and JP, with one being a genius and the other insane, often exploring parts of the creek inhabited by other children. Craig even having an underground hideout, located in a stump to himself, Kelsey, and JP too. I remember when this got announced, I expected this to be Harvey Beaks but with humans characters, instead. I remember really enjoying Harvey Beaks when I was younger, for the short time it aired on Nickelodeon and later Nicktoons. That series was made by the Chowder creator. Though not as chaotic, it's still pretty charming. Craig of the Creek is somewhat similar. You can pretty much tell this series is the spiritual successor to Clarence, though it's a bit less realistic, though pretty close. I never really watched this show all too often, as I was interested in other stuff, but I recall catching some earlier episodes involving Kelsey searching for a book in a library, Craig being a hoarder, one where they explore the sewers, and the episode where the main trio all get cursed by some lesbian witches, Luz and Amity. Wait, wrong show. In theory, this might seem like a mindless little cartoon to throw on to have your 8-year-old waggle their arms and do the JP, though I believe this series goes much deeper than that, but I've been missing out due to me either focusing on whatever little crumbs of Gumball, We Bare Bears, or OKKO that were airing left pretty early on, or me focusing on the Disney Channel shows that would premiere during its run like Big City Greens, Amphibia, and Molly McGee, or me watching LS Mark's cartoon ranking videos and Scott the Woz episodes. It's weird how this is considered a staple of the network, though I still view it being a bit more recent, much like how Nickelodeon considers The Loud House a staple, because that's one of the 2 only cartoons they have currently, but it could just be me getting old, I guess. Disney Channel even does this with Big City Greens, despite nobody ever talks about it. The series also premiered right as memes revolving around the infamous Beanmouth started to appear online, with this series being no exception. I think the show even references older shows that aired on the network, like how the Elders mentioned some older shows in one episode, and another has Craig wearing an Eduardo mask. I think KO even appears in one episode, as part of an in-universe fighting game roster. Pretty sure there might be some references I missed, and I don't think this was really an important detail of the series at all, but I thought I might still bring it up. This series was popular enough to get a spin-off series targeted to an even younger demographic, much like We Baby Bears, focusing on the adventures of Craig's younger sister Jessica in her Big Little World. Not to be confused with Little Big Planet for PlayStation 3. Like Baby Bears, this series also uses a pastel color palette. Again, I'm not really a fan of Cartoon Network trying to target preschoolers, as I think the network works better for people of all ages. Overall, Craig of the Creek isn't my absolute favorite CN series in the world, but I thought it was a good little show from what I saw, and I don't think the Jessica spin-off really dips it down a bit either. Summer Camp Island. A cutesy little show that happened to air on Cartoon Network, which I felt like it's kind of out of place. This feels more like something you'd see on Nick Jr. It premiered during summer 2018, or what Cartoon Network considered their best summer ever to be, though I just ignored it because I don't think it's really that important of a show. Again, this was when I watched Cartoon Network less often, so I never really had the chance to watch this series. It's the first series that moved over to HBO Max for premieres, and the only one to return to the main network. I got nothing else to say. Victor and Valentino. As you can probably tell, I have less to say about the shows, due to me not watching as much Cartoon Network as I used to. This series has the typical 2010s Cartoon Network art style too. The series follows the titular characters who find Latino mythology fascinating, with a lot of it being real and causing chaos, regular show style, only not as good. The dynamic of the titular characters are even similar to that of regular shows, only not as good, with Victor being Rigby, and Valentino being Mordecai. Then there's Charlene, who has a creepy obsession with Victor. If there's anything I could describe this series as, it's a mixture between Gravity Falls and DuckTales 2017 with the Book of Life and Coco. Mau Mau Heroes of Pure Heart. We've went nearly a decade without a one-season wonder, yet here's another one. Just comes to show how Cartoon Network really fell off at the end of this decade, though I wouldn't really saw this show as any bad. It's created by Parker Simmons, who previously worked on OKKO, and I think this series really wanted to be another OKKO really badly, though it's more fantasy-focused with every character being an animal. I wouldn't say it's just as good as OKKO, but if I squint really hardly, I'd mistake this for Lego Monkey Kid. This series was also meant to get greenlit for a second season, but that never came to be, as it's been over 5 years since the series aired an episode. Infinity Train, yet another mistreated Cartoon Network series, which is apparently the norm at this point. I think it's the first series in a long while to be rated TV PG, though I also think it's the last one. This series contains a lot more mature themes compared to other shows airing at the time. Each season is considered to be a book, which Nickelodeon's Avatar franchise, not to be confused with the Avatar movies, also does. Each book follows a different protagonist, though I've only watched the first one with Tulip. The first 2 seasons aired on the network proper, but apparently its content was too dark for children, so it was moved to HBO Max, where the last 2 seasons were dropped before getting purged off the face of the earth.